The Garden of Ink and Bones is a monthly podcast about witchcraft, powerful plants, and making magic. I'm Belle of Belladonna and Bones, and I'll be joined by occult artist Rue of Old Omen, and we're witches who like to get our hands dirty. To us, magic is practical, visceral, and bound in blood to the soil and bones of our spiritual allies. It's time to get your hands into the dirt, do the work, make magic, and feel the witchcraft in your bones. Welcome to the Garden of Ink and Bones. Hello everyone and welcome to the Garden of Ink and Bones. I'm Belle, coming at you from a very hot and smoky Melbourne this morning, and with me is Rue. How are you?
Hey Belle, I'm good. I'm so sorry I wasn't here for the last podcast with Ivy, but as you probably all know, I have been dead with the flu and busy with life. How are you?
I'm good. We're actually tacking this on to the end of the start of that podcast, so you're all good.
Well, awesome. Let's just pretend I was here the whole time, guys.
Yeah, just pretend she was here the whole time. So we obviously, Rue has let the cat out of the bag, because that means we're actually in this episode going to bring you a interview with the wonderful Ivy of Circle Thrice, and we'll go into that in a little bit later. But we hope you enjoy that format, and yes, that interview is just with me, just because Rue was a bit sick, quite sick, and yeah, we hope you enjoy it, and any feedback you have would be awesome. On the subject of feedback, we have had so many great messages about the fact we're back. You know, I got one this morning. He did tell me not to tell someone else that we were his favourite podcast, but yeah, you know who you are, and we're happy to be your favourite podcast.
Oh, thanks, whoever that is.
Yeah, I'll share that with Rue on the Insta. But yeah, it is great to be back, and really, you guys, your feedback's been amazing. So thank you for sticking with us.
It does mean a lot, and I do apologise now if I'm croaky or spluttery during this, guys. I have been eating heaps of mullion, but yeah, still waiting for this to clear up.
Yeah, well, we are both dealing with, smoke. It's a constant part of our environment right now, more so for Rue than me. We've just hit it today because we've got some fires out in Gippsland. But I think the stats are at 2 million hectares of the eastern seaboard of Australia on fire. It is really, really intensely horrible. I will put a link to donate to the CFA and the Royal Fire Service in the show links for this podcast, because those guys are out there and they're volunteers and they are working really hard, and, they put their lives on the line to try to keep everyone else safe.
100%. And, we have already lost a few of them for helping, which... Yeah. And a few of our friends are RFS firefighters, but also the fact that they've had a lot of funding cut from our federal government. So please, any donations would be absolutely awesome, guys.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. We could go into the government, but
let's not.
Let's just say they're climate denying jerks.
Ignorance is bliss.
Ignorance, yes. So.
Lunation.
What's been going on with you? Yes, Lunation
Rite. So yeah, what's been going on with me and Lunation Rite? So I have had about, I think, 3 good cracks at this so far, and I hate to say I still haven't finished. Hopefully, New Year's resolution that this is I'm gonna do it for the whole 28 days, guys. I promise. But life has just been hectic, and I feel like every time I say that, I jinx myself because it just absolutely amps up. I've never had a year so busy as it has been the last few months. So I think that's another reason I've just worn myself to the bone and gotten so sick. But yeah, I'd really love to talk about how we've both found the Lunation Rite. Did you manage to get through it?
I, like you, have not managed to do every day. the intestinal fortitude of people who manage to do every day in a row. I have done every day. I haven't done them in a row.
Yep.
So I've jumped back and forth. But it's... I'm sorry, there's noisy miners outside, so if you're getting a repetitive tweeting, that's them. But yeah, I've done every day, and I think the one thing it really, really does is it really gives you a intensely good understanding of those lunar day timings that I've gone on about so many times.
So something I want to ask then, because you've said that you've done every day, but you haven't done it consecutively.
Yep.
How do you feel missing a day affects it? Do you feel it affects it? Do you then wait a week so it falls on the proper day of the week?
I don't. I just take that day right out.
Yep.
So, and then I'll come back to it, that the next month.
Yep.
So no, I just come back to it as soon as I can. So, if tomorrow is the day, I'm out of sync with my days right now, but I think we're at like day 13. Hang on. Because we've been away and I have been napping all of this week. We're at day 6. Yeah, day 6 right now. If I started tomorrow, I'd just start on day 7.
Yep. See, I think that's where I sort of maybe should have tried to employ something like that. I just felt if I missed a day, then I had this guilt about me and didn't know how it would sort of fall into place. So then I'd be like, okay, just going to restart again. So I should probably just do it that way and be a bit more lenient with myself next time.
Yeah. And I think that's the same, with everything, unless you're doing full-on Solomonic ritual. You can be lenient with yourself and just pick up where you're at. And then that's what we've been trying to do with this podcast too. The new moon was last on the Boxing Day on the 26th. Yes, this podcast will come out hopefully for New Year's Eve. Depends on how busy our editor is. And yeah, and that's okay. It's okay. Have other things in your life going on. You and I talked about your tendency to mother right now.
Yeah, maybe a bit a bit too hard. It might be a New Year's resolution, a bit of a hint from the universe that maybe I need to stop mothering everyone and set up some boundaries. Because as I was saying to Belle, that it seems as though one of the main things that's sort of gotten in the way of this rite is that, one, we've had a lot of guests, which has been really absolutely wonderful for the end of the year. It seems like suddenly we've had travellers from all over the country come and stay, which has been so great. But I've also had one friend that has been, I think, a universal lesson for the last 5 years or so of someone that consistently requires mothering and pushing boundaries. And I know I've always had an issue with having no boundaries and just taking over. And I think this is finally my little push from the universe to say, oh, no, boundaries up. Enough is enough, and it's okay to walk away from certain people.
Yeah, and I think that's the point, isn't it? It's about finding some boundaries this year. We've got Saturn in Capricorn, Jupiter in Capricorn, so it's a good time to find all those boundaries, and make plans and things like that. And you know how much I love plans.
Yep, I'm quite the opposite. I'm so unorganized.
I'm not organized. Oh no, I procrastinate. I love plans though.
Yeah, I feel like I don't know, maybe my standards of organization are just so low that to me you appear quite organized.
Oh God, yes. I actually spent all morning yesterday, writing down plans for a herbal magic course.
Yeah, wow.
So that was, because I took the discussion we had last podcast about Cunningham's oils and brews.
Yes, I forgot. Yep.
Yeah. And then I started thinking more about about what I would do with that. And it's like, well, people often ask me how to make that. So there's sort of two components of it. I felt like there's two courses. One of them's the magical herbs and going through herbs in depth. And then there's the how to make things course, and sort of been playing with the idea of it being a video course. So just trying to work out what that entails, and look at writing a couple of the lessons and testing them out on a few people and seeing if it works. And then we'll see. We'll go from there.
That sounds absolutely awesome. I'd be more than happy to be a guinea pig for that.
Well, you're always going to be my guinea pig.
But yeah, so what did you find you got out of Lunation Rite, of what you did do?
I love, we all have our daily rituals, and a lot of them I do on the fly. Like, I'll often be doing my daily prayers in the car, because I'm, in a hurry and things like that. But with the Lunation Rite, because I really wanted to take the time to light the incense and things like that, I found myself making a bit more space for it. So there was that, and then the other thing was really that timing. I think it just gave you a really good grounding in the timings, of, how each day sits, how each day feels. Once you've gone and you've said the prayers for that day, and you've read through the notes, sitting with the fact that that day is for that thing, it gives you more of a sense of how that works in the universe and in your life. I really liked that. I thought that was really effective, because you're really taking the time to delve into the day in depth.
Yep.
Plus, I really liked the Orphic hymns. I've got the John Donne version, I think it is, and I just really enjoyed them. Like, in general, some of them are a bit on the nose, but in general, I really liked them.
I hadn't worked with Orphic hymns before, and so this was my first experience with it, and I'd had a few that you'd sent me, and then I found I was also researching. It seems as though there's a few slight variations of them out there, and some are a lot more almost like poetic and flowery, and some are a bit more sort of straight down the line. But it was pretty interesting working with them. I didn't even know really of their existence that much until now. I've always had this, I will admit, this complete aversion to anything Greek ever since I was a kid when it comes to like the Greek mythos and Greek deities. And so this has been a pretty good learning experience to actually warm me up to that and go, there's so much here that I've just sort of been ignoring.
Yeah, and I think, one thing Ivy does talk about in our interview, and also talks about in other things, is your magical posse. And I think those Orphic hymns really open up the magical posse possibilities. If you're doing a hymn to, let's go with Sappho, because she's on my mind right now. The opening up of the possibilities of having Sappho there to influence your female friends, influence your relationships with your female friends, and foster better and closer ties. Medea. Who else is in them? I'm having a brain fart. Nike, for war and things like that. But the idea of bringing those beings into your spiritual posse, not as gods you worship, but as beings that can aid you on with the tasks you have. And you don't have to bring all 28 that we use in the thing, or 68 or something that there are in the hymns, but just one or two that really reach out to you, and working with them.
Yeah, it's pretty in depth. It's pretty interesting, and like you said, there's so much more than the 28 that is included. And I definitely after this, I think I want to use the bones of what she's created with this formula and do it with the own deities that I work with and spirits that I have relationships with, and create my own little formula to even do it as say a weekly thing instead of say a 28-day thing to just continuously loop. Because the other thing that you did mention that I really liked about it was the fact that it has a structured time of it must happen every day at this hour. It's so much easier to then not be able to put it off and go, oh, no, no, I'll just do it tonight after I get home from work, or I'll just do it in 10 minutes' time. It was nice having that. You have to get up, you have to do it now. Do it before everyone else gets up in the house, and start the day like that in that space was so much more amazing.
Yeah, it really made a difference. The I really want people who are interested in the lunar days to consider doing the course, because you will really, really get an understanding of um, how those days actually work in the modern world.
Yeah. See, that's another good case in point, because I've always been very earth based, which I guess is the other reason that I've always felt this weird disconnect with the Greek mythology. Is I've always had a stronger tie to anything sort of Celtic and nature, really heavily nature based. But then the Greeks have a lot of the astrological things that are going on, and I've never been able to really delve into that the way that you do. And that's the really nice thing about the lunation rite, is it feels like it just sort of drums it into you in this cycle of this day you're working with this planet, you're working with these energies. It was a really amazing way to sort of learn about that.
Yeah. So other than that, there's on Ivy's website. There's the Agile Magic Manifesto, which is where she talks. I would say in brief, but it's 14 pages on how to use magical planning in your life, and it's like that's like the precursor or the introduction to this great big course that she is starting on the 8th of January. Now, I believe there are a few spots left, so if you're hearing this and you're interested in doing it, jump on over to circlethrice.com and join up. I'm doing it, but it is the big magical planning course. So it's planning as magic. It'll take you through in depth all of the things in the Agile Magic Manifesto, plus a lot more. All the people in the first course get live Q&As. Everyone who does it afterwards will get recorded Q&As. The thing, and I paid for my own course. I just want to be really clear about that. None of this is sponsored. I am just a big fan of Ivy. I'm really looking forward to it, and I hope you guys really enjoy the interview. The Ivy is just a really enjoyable speaker, and I think you'll get a lot out of the interview. And then go and listen to the free first part of the course on her website, and that would be awesome.
Very exciting.
Really
Definitely a good way to start the year, I think.
Yeah, and look, I think it is perfectly situated in Capricorn and all of those things about getting your shit together, which is the whole New Year thing. Ivy's got some tips on your New Year's resolutions, but by the time this comes out might be a little bit redundant, but it's never too late to start. Ivy is absolutely brilliant. Wow, I'm just repeating myself today. Forgive us, guys. It's 10 a.m. on a Monday morning, and I'm probably a little. We've had awful night's sleep because of the heat here, so we're a little bit vague. What else have you got going on this month, Rue?
Uh, everything's finally coming to a head. So as of today, I try and not talk about my personal life too much, but my partner produces music and plays at a lot of festivals. So we've got New Year's coming up. So we are actually about to run down to a train station and pick up. We have a French international couple coming to stay with us who are also playing at the music festival. So that's really exciting. On top of that, there is just life and magic and everything. And I'm just trying to drag myself to the end of the year so I can start fresh. But I've had a few spells going on, and I do think that the Lunation Rite has really helped bring on a lot of stuff and a lot more organization, which despite how hectic life has been, I've been really quite happy at how much more I'm sort of getting done and more, I guess, energy to get things done. But I'm also quite excited to, after we finish recording, have a chat with you about a few things I want to get done when I've got a few days off in this next week for a few little projects that we've got going.
See, we're going to do our own bit of magical planning.
Yes.
All right, without further ado, people, we here is Ivy. Ivy is of Circle Thrice. She is the planning magic maven. Circle Thrice is organising enchantment where practical magic meets project management. She is the author of the Agile Magic Manifesto, the Lunation Rite, which we have talked about so much, and the Planning is Magic course. She also offers consultations, tarot readings, and long-term one-on-one consultation on your projects. It was an honour and a privilege to get to speak to Ivy for so long the other day, and I hope you guys really, really enjoy the feedback, the interview, and let us know your feedback on the interview format, and if there's things you think we could have done better, or anything like that. And just, let us reach out to us on Instagram, Garden of Ink and Bones. You can message me at Belladonna and Bones or Rue at old_omen. And we'd love to hear what you thought. So without any further ado, we're going to move on. Thanks, guys. We will see you next month.
Awesome. Enjoy, guys.
Hi, everyone. It's Belle. I'm back again. Something I keep forgetting to tell you. We have, if you're following along on Instagram, you will have seen that I have created a group discussion list. Now, that is born out of the fact that, like everyone else, want to move away from Facebook as much as possible, and other places where other people control our discussion and what you see and when you see it. So what we have done is create a groups.io mailing list. You can subscribe in a couple of ways. The easiest way for you to subscribe is just visit our website, and if you scroll down just to where the 3 blocks are, the third block says join the discussion, and you can put your email address in there and join up. Now, it's a true discussion list, so it's back and forth. We want you all to talk to each other. We'll be on there as well as much as possible. We want you all to support each other and build a community of like-minded magical users. Now, we're going to have people from all walks of magic in this group, so tolerance and open-minded discussion is paramount, and I will come down hard on anyone who is an asshole, to put it bluntly. So if you're not interested in what someone has to say, use the don't say anything at all and keep scrolling. But if you are and you want to have a good discussion with people, let's do that, you know. And that, when I say don't be an asshole, I don't mean don't disagree. You know, we want to have open discussion. Let's just not be assholes about it. And especially if someone's doing something potentially dangerous with herbs, you know, and let's talk about things in a civil manner. Remember that everything on the list is private. keep it all confidential. If it starts to get out, I will hurt people. But we want people to have that discussion list where the true old days of the internet, and I hope some of you are old enough to remember when we used to have mailing lists where people would email back and forth and get into really good discussions without having to run off and go log into a website to do it. It would come straight into your emails. It'll stay small, I expect. I don't think we're going to grow into any behemoth, but you can set digests and things like that. So here's how to subscribe. You can go straight to our website, gardenofInkandbones.com, scroll down, put your email address in the thing and hit subscribe. You can also go to the groups.io homepage, which is https://groups.io/g/Garden of Ink and Bones. Or there is a subscription email address as well, which is another long one, but it is Garden of Ink and Bones plus symbol subscribe at groups.io. So do that. Join up. We will have some wonderful discussions together. It's not a consultation group for, you're not getting free consultations with Rue and I. This is a group where everyone's there to support each other and hopefully enchant our lives just a little bit more. So thank you, and now on with the interview. Hi everyone, today we're with Ivy from Circle Thrice, where practical magic meets project planning. Ivy, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being our first guest.
Yes, very exciting. I feel like there's a lot of pressure on me. First guest you've ever had.
Well, when it comes to Rue and I, there's not much pressure. Now, of course, Rue can't be with us today, as I've already told our listeners, but it's just you and me, and we'll start on a very practical note. What is practical magic to you?
So I really enjoy the definition of magic that's kind of come out of sort of 80s chaos theory, which is that it's odds manipulation, right? So there are techniques that can be used to tweak the odds in your favor. And I love that because that definition is extremely agnostic. Yes, you can have spirit beings you work with, you can have religion you practice, you can have all kinds of techniques, but in the end, when you get to practical enchantment, it's really about getting things to work for you, and you do that kind of by tweaking the odds.
So if you're going to tweak the odds, what are the 3 things you think that people need to have in their toolkit?
So first of all, you definitely want to have a divination technique in your toolkit. So some way of checking in with information that might not be normally accessible to you. So yes, that could be the future, which is what we think of when we think of like a divination, but it could also be just hidden information or even information from yourself that's hidden from you. So a good tool for divination is important, and that could be runes or tarot or I Ching or astrology or anything, right? It doesn't matter. The second tool you really, really need is some sort of practical enchantment method. I love sigils because, again, very easy, very agnostic. But whether you are doing candle magic or hoodoo is your style, or you're doing kind of Western tradition of more ceremonial stuff, some sort of methodology for getting stuff to happen. And then the third tool that's really critical is having some sort of what I think of as a spirit posse. I always like to think of it as a posse, some entities that are non-corporeal that you work with. And the most obvious candidate, if this were like brand new to someone, I always tell them, go to the ancestors, the people who came before you in your line, who have a vested interest in you and your success. And that makes a really good starting point to build a spirit posse.
Yeah, I think a lot of people who come to magic have can have damaged relationships with their family. So when we talk about ancestors, they tend to get a bit antsy. And from my personal point of view, it was very hard to come at with my relationship with my family. But so how do you think that people can get past that?
This is always such a good question. So I like to think of ancestor work as sort of like beginner and advanced, right? So beginning ancestor work is around finding the people who were in your line who you did have a good relationship with. So if it's not your immediate, say, forebears, maybe it's their grandparents or their grandparents. And yeah, great granny, the Catholic, may not be comfortable with kind of the religious practices that a pagan has now, but they don't have to know. You don't have to get into that. You can be like, we're not going to base it on that. We're just going to base it on, I'm your genetic kind of results, and or your, familial, because even adoptees can do this, right? Like, I'm the result of your influence, and you should want me to do well, and to avoid the trickier parts of it. And that's the kind of the beginner's method, to sort of say, I'm going to focus on the places that feel really good. And note, too, that you can widen ancestors to be beloved dead. Folks who have passed on before you who might not be your blood relatives at all, but that you have a connection. And you can work on relationships with those people.
Yeah, I really like that thought. The people who may have had an influence on your life through a book or their music or their teaching, and they've passed on, but they still might care. Or a school teacher who cared about you very much. Those sort of things. I think they're really useful.
Exactly. That's a great place to start. Now, if you're really digging into ancestral work, there's specialists in this field, right, who are much more focused on kind of like healing ancestral curses or remediation of people who in life were mentally ill or who had addiction problems, those kinds of very deep work. And there's some good books, there's some good things, but that's my angle on it is if you're just starting out, stick with the people who are kind of friendlier and focus on creating a relationship with them. I think sometimes we get this idea that it's all or nothing, put your toe in, touch base with someone who's gone before you, who was a mentor to you or a beloved aunt, even if they're not technically your aunt, one of those kinds of aunts. And start there. And once you kind of create a connection with someone who's watching out for you, you can use that connection to sort of vet other connections. Is your cranky grandma or grandpa less cranky now that he's dead? That can happen. And maybe this is an opportunity to like heal some stuff up. But even if not, even if that's a little bit too much right now, you can start where you're at. And this is something that I always recommend, is that when you're in the midst of like some practical work, you want to change your life, you hate your job and you want a new one, you want to move to the other side of the world and it's going to take a lot of effort. When you're focusing on a real practical goal like that, stick with what you know. Right? There's no reason to also open the Pandora's box of, oh, look at all of these new kinds of magic or these new beings I could work. No, stick with what you know, stick with what you've had success with, and leverage what you've got to get to where you want to be.
Yeah, and I think that's something all of our listeners should try. Now, when you talk about making magic, and one of the things I think you're most known for, aside from your excellent newsletters, but is the Agile Magic Manifesto. So and I probably just said that wrong, but that free download that people can get from your website, tell our listeners what that is and what it's for.
So there's a little background to this. So in my day job life, I'm a project manager, and I have been for something like 12 years. That's my career job, but it's also a career that I enjoy very much. I'm very lucky to be able to do something that I'm both good at and enjoy, and that's a really nice place to be. So it occurred to me some years back, having also been, a tarot readers and a practicing kind of witch and magic user since my teens, that those two skills go really well together, magic and project management, because project management is this toolkit for kind of like helping projects happen. So like for a company, this would be, to build a new piece of software or to build a building or whatever it is. There's a project manager who helps make sure stuff happens in the right way so that the teams of people who are working on it can achieve a good result. Well, all of those same tools can be leveraged for your own kind of personal projects, the goals you have for your own life. And they dovetail really neatly with magic. So my particular form of project management is for software and hardware. So I'm in the computer field. And there are a number of different sort of methodologies that are known to software people for getting magic done or for getting projects done that aren't, they don't think about it in a magical way. But since I do, I came up with this idea of the Agile Magic Manifesto. So let me talk about what Agile is. In the 70s, there was a group of software programmers who were pretty well known in their field, and they holed up in like a ski lodge for a week to discuss how to build software better, how they could have a plan to make software happen more easily. And what they came out with was the Agile Manifesto, which is very well known in my career field, like not well known outside of it. So it's kind of occulted to people who aren't in software. But software people, this is very common now and it's well known. And the idea of the Agile Manifesto for software was that it empowered these software developers to create software in a way that was very flexible. It allowed them to change course and change their plans as necessary to make successful software. So I turned that into the Agile Magic Manifesto. And if anyone goes and Googles the Agile Manifesto, there's this kind of like, we are uncovering better ways of making software and helping others make software. And we value individuals and interactions over hierarchy and rules, right? We value working software over a comprehensive plan. So I turned that into a magic manifesto. So the idea is to practice Agile Magic. You value individuals and interactions over hierarchy and rules. You value working enchantment over a comprehensive philosophy. So if it works, it's good. It doesn't have to be, perfectly in line with your personal metaphysics. We value spiritual collaboration over some sort of contract negotiation. So work with your posse. And we value responding to change over following a plan, which is literally straight out of the Agile Manifesto. Respond to change. Don't just follow a plan to the wrong place. And so I wrote this manifesto, and it's like this little 14-page booklet on what Agile Magic is. And it's a way of doing magic that is very attuned to an environment where things change rapidly and there's a lot of chaos. And, the plan you make today might be completely tossed out the window tomorrow. And if you look around at the world we're all living in, that's what we've got. We've got a lot of change. We've got a lot of chaos. We need to be flexible and we need to be agile.
That's really great. I'm going to get us to just pause for a second. I've got to shut these windows. Someone's decided to start mowing. 1 second. Sorry, we're having a delightfully quiet Sunday morning, and then all of a sudden the mowers started.
Well, it's your longest day there, and it's our shortest day here, so happy solstice.
Happy solstice, yes. That's definitely part of the reason I think it's great that we're talking today, because it's a real turning point for the Earth. And, it's that time of year where you get to almost hit the reset button.
It is. I think that's true regardless on which side of the Earth you're on. It's like an opportunity, every twice a year, every 6 months or so to sort of reset. And that's very agile, right? You don't just make a plan and ignore it. You reset course regularly to make sure you're still doing the right thing in the right way, that your magic is still working.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So I know in your recent newsletter you spoke about things you do on solstices and New Year's, and like this will come out after the solstice, but prior to the New Year's Day, and that's I think New Year's Day is an important turning point for the world, regardless of what's going on astrologically. What are some things that you do as a ritual for the coming new year?
Oh, so this is an excellent question because, yes, despite the fact that New Year is kind of a calendrical construct, right? It doesn't have anything to do with astrology or the longest day or the shortest day. It still has a lot of importance because I think in the newsletter I use the word zeitgeist, which literally means time ghost, which is a perfect sort of way to describe the New Year because it's a point where we reset our calendar clocks. We reset things. And so there's a lot of energy toward starting new things and kicking things off. And I do have some regular stuff that I do. Ironically, though, I like to start now. And so one of the things I love to do is I love to do what I call cheaters resolutions. I recommend this for everyone. So New Year's comes and people make New Year's resolutions. And something like 92% of all New Year's resolutions are people don't make their resolutions, right? They fail at them. And that's a pretty bad statistic. And so I write about this on my blog every single year. I'll write a little bit about this. But one of the ways to get around this is to do cheaters resolutions, which means start right now with whatever it is that you're thinking you want to accomplish. And start now so that when you actually resolve to do it on New Year's, you've got like a head start, right?
Yep.
That's one of the things I like to do. The other thing I love to do is this is a sort of a between time of year from the solstice to the actual New Year, because things get, in my industry especially, things get real quiet. I know if you work in retail, that's not the case, right? But it's often a quiet time of year. And a lot of people are, focusing on, personal celebrations and family. And so I love to kind of do all my annual planning this time of year, kind of, kick things off. I do a big retrospective where I look back at the prior year. And that's a very agile technique, but it's much longer term. Agile is like on 2 to 4 week cycles. This is a much longer cycle where I'm just going to look back over the past year. All week so far. I mean, even this past week, I've been looking on, for example, on my blog, which is, it's for public consumption, but it in some ways is an interesting journal of what I've been thinking about and going through all year. And so I've been looking at that. I've been looking back at my personal kind of bullet journal and seeing, what happened when and how things turned out. And so that's a great opportunity. And before you look forward, to look back and just kind of say, hey, what am I proud of? What did I accomplish? What didn't go so well? How do I want to change course moving forward? And then I also have and this is just personally my obsession, I have this thing about getting the laundry done before the stroke of midnight on New Year's Eve. Something about starting as you continued, having everything clean, which...
Folded? Are you getting to the folded point?
Well, usually this is an aspirational goal, and laundry is kind of like our personal Sisyphus thing, right? In our household, it's like never done, and there's always more of it. And so there's usually like one load that goes in the washer at 11:59, and one load that goes in the dryer at 11:59. And if we're close to done, we feel really good. But yeah, no, not quite folded. That would be nice. But every year we try.
Yeah, look, folded is like this mythical land that never happens.
I know, it's crazy. And the worst thing is, so we have a teenager now, and what this seems to mean is all the towels. I have never seen so many towels get dirty, right? Yeah, I know. And I know it's a teenage thing because, teenagers are, trying to be grown up and clean about things, but they're teenagers. And so there's just all these towels and they just never get. So yeah,
Yeah.
I can't be disingenuous and say, no, all our laundry is folded, because that would just be a big fat lie.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like I've spent a lot of years working with Chinese companies and in and out of China and things, and don't do it so much now, but I used to. And one of the things for Chinese New Year, which is actually like very early this year, it's in January.
Oh.
And is that your house is clean, so that the kitchen god is happy. And the kitchen god lives under the sink. And that means everything has to be clean, because one of the last things people clean is the cupboard under the sink. So yeah, you have to clean the house top to bottom before Chinese New Year. And then, of course, the great tradition of wearing new clothes on New Year's Day, right down to new underwear, because you're greeting the year fresh.
Right. And what's fascinating about this to me is, despite the fact that Chinese New Year is a lunar festival, which is why it kind of changes time a little bit right through the year, it's around the same time of year, but it's fascinating to see how many of the traditions are the same.
Yeah.
That regardless of where you are in the world and what kind of calendar you're on, there's these moments in time that have this impact, that are a chance to start over and kick something new off. And I really think that, there's some eye rolling about, I don't make resolutions because nobody follows through with them anyway. I know I don't bother with that because it doesn't, there's real value in kind of embracing the energy around that. And hopefully with some knowledge about planning and some magic, you can do better than the 92% of people who, don't get their resolutions done. You can make a plan for the year that you can actually accomplish.
Exactly. Now that's a great segue. Planning is magic. Your new course starts in January, and people can access the first lesson / overview introduction online right now, and I'll link that in the show notes. What can people expect? I feel like we've spoken a lot about the philosophies behind what you do. What more are they going to get out of this course?
So Planning is Magic is a course that I've been working on now probably for a couple of years. It's probably a couple of years in work now. And it sort of distills my knowledge around project management and practical magic together into this one course. And for a really long time before I named it, I'm not very good at naming things. So for a really long time, it was just called the Big Course, because it was like this giant chunk of information that I wanted to share. And what it does is it's a full-on kind of course to give you the tools to potentially change your life, right? So I know that sounds really kind of like grandiose or whatever, but it's really an end-to-end introduction to this practical magic project management thing that I do. And so it's 7 lessons. The first one is free, and it's just the overview. And I put that out there for free because I just wanted people to know kind of what would be in the course and what they could expect. Also, what I sound like, because if you're listening to this going, man, she sounds really annoying, maybe you don't want to take the class, but you could hear how I present and kind of what my style is. So it's this, in addition to the first lesson, there's 6 more lessons that I'm going to put them out every other week, kicking off January 8th. And the way the course is structured is it's top down. So the first lesson is called Your Life, because we're going to start big. And it's really about helping you find kind of your values, what you care about, your mission, how you feel like you want to be in the world, and then a vision for where you want to be at some point in the future, like a few years out, even like a year, 3-year, 5-year kind of plan. So that's a very big, high level view. And from there, we start breaking it down in, what's the gap between where you are now and your vision for your best life. And then what are the goals that will get you there? And if you don't know how to get there, what are the special kinds of goals that'll help you figure out how to get there? Because that's a whole subset of this. And from there into creating a plan, creating actual tasks, getting stuff done. And it covers the whole Agile methodology. So the Agile Magic Manifesto talks about what Agile Magic is, but this actually covers how to run this big project of yours, a personal project to change your life in an Agile way. So, kind of what the process of that is, of keeping a backlog of things that you want to do and prioritizing them, and getting them small enough to actually do. So, and it just goes very in depth. So, for example, for goals, it's not just about how to figure out what you want. It's also about how to make goals that are actually doable. Because my philosophy is one of the reasons that people's resolutions fail is that their resolutions are just undoable goo. And undoable goo is really hard to actually accomplish. Like if you set yourself a resolution, if your goal is to be healthier, well, that's a perfectly good vision for your life. You can picture yourself in a year as healthy and fit and a non-smoker and someone who eats right. You can picture that, but be healthier is totally undoable. It's just goo. So how do you turn that into something you can actually accomplish, that you can get up on, in January, that you can actually start and do every day, start doing the pieces of this that get you to the end. So this is about the tools you need for like marathon level life changing.
Wow, that is certainly intense. I think on goals as goo, I feel like sometimes that's the inherent moral of the story when people say be careful what you wish for. I wish to never have to worry about money again in my life, and I die the next day, so I never worry about money again in my life. That sort of, I think that's to try and people to stop being goo. Don't negotiate a magical contract and be so vague that it can backfire on you.
I think that's completely accurate, and it's not just because it can backfire in a sort of monkey's paw kind of way. Because I'm not saying the monkey's paw stuff never happens, but honestly, it's because you'll never achieve the goal in the way that you want because there's no clear path. I mean, if you want to make magic work, you have to give it some kind of connection or link or path to the result you want. Which is why so much of magic is about stealing dirt from the people you want to affect, taking dirt from your bank and having the signature of the judge in your court case and all that kind of materia and connection stuff. It comes from giving the magic a path to work. And so if you're changing your own life, you want something in your life to be different, right? You have to give that magic a place to go. I mean, the other critical part about these goals that are just goo is that you might actually achieve the goal only to discover it really wasn't what you wanted all along. People are kind of bad at knowing what will really satisfy them or make them happy. It's kind of human nature that we're not really good at that. Plenty of people have graduated from law school 4 years later and suddenly realized, maybe I don't want to be a lawyer. And I'm not just saying lawyers, not just to crap on lawyers here. It's really like anybody. You start some big thing and then you never check back in with yourself. You never reevaluate to see if this goal that you came up with is like this, 19-year-old kid is still what you want to be doing.
Exactly. I mean, I'm in my 40s now and I'm on my sort of 6th real change of career. And sort of in the midst of it now. So yeah, it's I think I always say to young people that it's young people. Oh my God, I'm 40 and I'm saying young people.
Yeah. I know where you're coming from.
Yeah, don't stress. Like do something now that doesn't hurt you for the future, but just do it. Like don't go buy a $40,000 car at 19 that you're going to pay off for ages, because that's stupid, right? But don't be afraid to work in a cafe and make jewelry for 12 months. Don't be afraid to do the first year of your course and change your mind. I think people need to realize that their life is long.
No, that's actually really true. And what I find actually in my clients that I work with, right, because I do actual, client consulting for people for kind of personal project management, magical kinds of stuff. I find that, sometimes people are so worried about making the wrong choice that they don't do anything. It's kind of this sort of like they just freeze up. And part of my goal with with like the Planning is Magic course is not that you make a plan and you ignore it. Plan, and I say this all the time, plan is a verb, way more than a noun. It's something you do ongoing, kind of picture yourself in the future, and then keep revisiting where your progress is, what things have changed, what the outside world is showing you that's different, because that's the path, that's the magic, is to just sort of like point yourself in the right direction and do things that'll move you forward. And if you're agile about it, if you change course when things change, you'll end up somewhere cool regardless, right? That's the idea. Because here's a really great example. I've talked to people who want to write a book. I mean, this is actually a very common kind of how it'd be great to write a book. And they can picture themselves as having written a book. That's their vision, right? In my little project plan, that's their vision. Well, how do you write a book? Well, I'm no expert on. I've written on lots and lots of stuff, but I'm no expert on, like, say, writing a novel. But I can tell you, and from everything I've read, the way you write a book is to actually write things. Like, that's, if you sat down every day and wrote one page, in a year you would have a novel. Now, it might be crap or completely unpublishable or need a ton of work, but you'll have a book. If you don't write for a year, you'll be a year older and you still won't have written a book. So if that's your goal, you have to break it down into that kind of, every evening I sit down and I write one page, at least one page. And that's how you be a writer, right? And then you're a writer. Because life is long, and theoretically long, we hope it's long, but people can spend years thinking about the thing that they want and not doing it. So do something today, anything that points you in the right direction. Like you said, don't do anything like that'll hurt you in the future, but point yourself in a direction and keep going. And if after a year you have 365 pages and you're like, yeah, this isn't as much fun as I thought, right? I'm going to do something else with this, right? You'll be a much better writer than when you started, and you'll have learned something useful, and you can point in a new direction and do something new.
That's right. And if they're being agile, then they probably would have realized it before a year.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think you made a good point there, that people sometimes know what they think they want. And, when I spoke to you and had a tarot reading, it must have been over a year ago, and I was talking about all these options I had for Belladonna and Bones and different things. And I just really, I had all these options, and we looked at them, and in the tarot reading it was sort of like, yeah, you could. And that was where I stopped. I hit an absolute do not pass with all of that. And then spent the year getting one of my goals, which was to have a 6-figure salary. And I did that, and it was awful. But the job that involved doing it was awful. And now I'm back at that place where I was 12 months ago, where I'm saying, well, what do I want to do? Where do I want to go with this? And I feel like I just put it aside. I went, okay, I got one of my goals. I'm going with it. This can all sit there because it's just not the right time. So, yeah, I didn't do anything on it for 12 months. And that's where I fell down.
Well, so no, it's fascinating because, so you had a goal to have a 6-figure salary, which, there's nothing inherently good or bad. It's a very neutral goal, right? Like, it can be good or it can be bad. The thing is, there's value in having gotten a job with that salary and decided that the quality of the job is more important than the salary. That, like, you've learned something super important through going through that process.
Yeah.
Right? That you wouldn't have known otherwise. Now, if you got the 6-figure job a week after you intended to and then spent, 11 and a half months hating it, that might be a little less agile. But if you had a goal and you met your goal, and then you took a sharp look at it and said, hey, this isn't what I thought, right? This is, I achieved it. It can take a long time to achieve things, right? So sometimes you don't know until you get there and you're like, this is not what I expected. The interesting thing about when I do tarot readings for people, I tend to not remember what I tell them. I know that sounds silly. I actually think it's it's like I put it out to the person and then it leaves my brain.
Yep, it's the waiter syndrome. You're providing a service, and once the service is provided, that's it. Waiters will remember what everyone at a table is having right up to the moment that they put those plates down.
I hadn't thought about it that way. That's really interesting because I always thought about it. Well, so when I read for people, when I have a good reading, like when I'm on and information is coming to me, not just from the cards, but just coming at me and I'm relaying that to people, it takes a lot out of me. And sometimes, like the most powerful readings I've ever done, I'll get cold. And then at the end of it, I have to like have a hot bath and tea and a nap. And this probably makes me not the greatest reader because it takes a lot out of me, but I feel like it's energy going out of me. And that's sort of where I come from. Like it goes out of me and then it's out there doing that information is out there doing its thing. And then it's not in my head anymore. So I hope I didn't tell you anything not useful. But to be honest with you, these are readings I get frequently where people go, which of these 5 options? And the reading is, any of these could be interesting.
Yeah, exactly.
You're right. If you just take any of those could be interesting and then I will do none of them. The more kind of like agile method of taking that is just pick one, even at random. Or pick the one that you'll figure out the shortest, try it for a month or 2 months, and then if it's just not clicking, ditch it and try the next one.
Yeah, and I think that's what people are going to get out of doing the Planning as Magic course.
Yeah, no, I hope so. I also just see in working with folks that, how do I want to put this? So I'm also in my 40s, right? And so if you're listening to this and you're 18, oh gosh, the course would be amazing for you, right? Like you have all this information that could get you doing stuff right away, and that would be so cool. But for those of us who've been down the road a while, what I figure is that a lot of the stuff that's easy for us, the easy goals,
yep,
we've done already.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like,
it's true.
Yeah, I managed to get through school and I got a career that's pretty good for me, or I met somebody and that's been good, or whatever it is. Like we've got some stuff down, and the stuff that's left is the hard stuff. It's hard because of our personalities, or it's hard because of just the way we're wired, and those are much harder goals to meet. And in part, it's because it can be just hard to do the daily work. So one of my personal challenges, which I always like to share this sort of stuff because I don't want people to assume that just because I know a lot about project planning, that magically makes me perfect. Because I'm very leery of people who are like, why, yes, I'm a life coach and my own life is without flaw. Yeah, well, we're all human and shit happens. And one of my personal challenges is physical fitness. Mm-hmm. And I'm like the 98-pound weakling on the beach who gets sand kicked, right? I've like never been very fit or strong. I tend to eat good and I sleep right. So there's places where I'm on track, but exercising has never been one of them. I'm just sort of inherently lazy, and I find exercising uncomfortable, and I find organized sports a special torture that brings back every embarrassing moment of my childhood PE classes. Look, there's a lot of baggage there, right? And I know that about myself, and I'm at the point where I'm tricking myself into doing the right things. And I'm pushing through it and I'm making good habits. But man, I'm in my 40s. You'd think I'd have figured this out before now. But no. This is the hard one for me. It may not be hard for someone else. Someone else might be like, yeah, I'm on 3 different, amateur softball leagues and I run 3 times a week and it's no big deal. But for them, maybe their budget is out of control. And that's where their sticking point is. So, yeah. And when it comes to the hard things, right? Because when you look ahead at where you want your life to be in 3 years, I mean, we've all been in that spot where like, we've all been at that moment where like, everything is terrible. I want a completely different life. Well, that could be you. But for most of us, there's stuff that's cool. We're like, okay, this is good and this is good. But there's stuff that's a gap. Like we want to make a change and do something different in an area. And that could be a real effort. And if you do it in a haphazard way where you're just kind of like, yeah, I guess I'll kind of try this. Look, life happens the whole time you're working on your goal, right? The whole time you're writing that novel, you're also dealing with sick kids and a crappy boss and, summer vacation. And the next thing you know, 8 months have passed. So without a method for just kind of like having a little structure and checking back in with yourself, it's easy to lose track.
Yep.
Because
that's perfect.
Yeah, because what I didn't want to do was set up a structure that was so rigid that there isn't room for serendipity or awesome coincidences, and we want to make room for that magic to work, right? We want to make room for all the magical enchantment you do as part of this process to also, be effective and give you like wonderful opportunities that then you can take, even if it means shifting your plan.
Yeah. And I think that's perfect, right? That's the thing, is make our lives better, and not be so locked into something that you can't say change. Like, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So, Rue and I have been both working the Lunation Rite, as and when we can, for both of us, through the last couple of months, and we love it. I enjoy the impetus to get up and do it in the mornings. Take those couple of minutes just before leaving the house to connect and feel like I've done something towards making my day better. Can you tell people about the Lunation Rite and what you wanted everyone to get out of it?
So for the last few years, I've been working with Hygromantea, which is the earliest of the grimoires, right? And it's kind of like the source for what eventually became the Key of Solomon and those kind of grimoires. And I was introduced to it by Gordon, because I'm a premium member of Gordon's site, and he had a course on it, and I really liked a lot of what it has. And I'm not particularly a Solomonic magician. I mean, I've fooled with it a little bit, but for me, it's experimental. It's not my go-to for when I want to get stuff done. But in the Hygromantea, there are these lunar days, one for each day of the month. And there's 29 of them. And each one is like, this day is good for this. So this day is good for luck. This day is good for destruction. This day is good for restraining something from happening. This day is good for figuring stuff out. And I started to play with it. And I have a regular post on my blog called Next Week in Magic, which takes the lunar days and combines them with astrological stuff and then suggests ideas for magical workings, right? And so this is just something I'm interested in and I've been doing for a couple of years, playing with now. And I started to think a little bit about these lunar days and how some of them seem to connect with one of the other things I'm super interested in, which is the Orphic hymns. And so, this is a book of hymns to all these kind of, Greek Roman era deities. And so I had the Hygromantea in my head. I had the Orphic hymns in my head. And then the third piece of this was the Greek magical papyri, which the acronym is the PGM. So this is a book by this guy named Betts. It's this fat book. And it's Egyptian Greek magic, right? It's all these papyri that have eventually been now translated into this fat book of magical text, because it's just fascinating. And all of these sort of like collided in my head. I've got these days of the month that are good for certain things. I've got this inkling that certain deities in the Orphic hymns match to those really well. And then I've got this knowledge about the PGM and the rituals I've been doing from that book. And it all came together in this Lunation Rite. So I'm sorry, that's a long background history of what this weird thing is. Right. But what it is it's a month-long rite that you're supposed to do starting the day of the new moon every morning just after dawn. And it's this kind of personal growth rite. So the idea is that you go through and you do this ritual every morning for a month, for 39 days. and it's supposed to be kind of a personal transformation. And so it's based on what these days are good for, based on the Hygromantea, and it's based on these Orphic hymns, but then it's also based on this PGM invocation to the Agathos daemon, which really just struck me when I first ran across it and started using it. So the Agathos daemon is the good spirit, and it's a kind of fascinating entity because it was originally sort of like a lucky household spirit in Greece, but in Greco-Roman Egypt, it got kind of elevated and associated with all these other really powerful deities like the Aeon, Helios, and Zeus. And it's considered it's like a serpent deity. And it's got this very kind of like serpent egg start of the world vibe. And it's quite common in the PGM, this entity, the Agathos daemon. And so I've combined an invocation to the Agathos daemon with an Orphic hymn that matches the day. And then for each day, there's a petition you make that's based on an interpretation of these days around manifesting the Greek virtues, right? So, having kind of transforming yourself, making yourself more courageous, or have better sense of wisdom, or to manifest justice, those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm. So, do you think that the daily lunation rite is almost because of the interaction with the Agathos daemon, that there's almost an element of daily protection and daily household blessing involved?
Yeah, no, I definitely think the ritual can have that aspect. So what I've discovered, and so now because I made this lunation rite, which is it's like a little booklet, and it's up for sale on my website, and it's like if you bought it, it'd be like $1 a day for the 29 days, right? So you buy this little thing and it walks you through the whole process. I had to, in order to create it, I had to do it a ton, right? So I was playing with it and experimenting with it. And then I did it entirely for a month by myself. And then I did it with kind of some volunteers to get feedback. And then I did it with the kickoff group when I first released it. And we all worked it kind of together. And we worked it individually, but there was a group that we got together and discussed it. And so I've worked this rite a lot. And what I've discovered is that the core structure of it is really useful for, one, calling on kind of household protection, and also for just doing practical magic. So you could, once you've done the rite, you could pick a day out of it that's particularly good for something, and then you could actually do practical magic as part of the rite. So it's just a very handy little piece of ritual. And it's not super, like you said, a few minutes. It's not super long, because if I'm going to do something every day for 29 days, it needs to not be really onerous, right? The booklet describes everything in depth, and so the booklet is kind of long, but the core rite itself doesn't take very much time.
Yeah. And what I think our listeners are quite familiar with, well, at least familiar with me talking about the lunar days, if not having done some research on themselves by now. One of the things that I think you've really nailed in the booklet is interpreting the days, because it can be very hard to understand how the words used for some people in the Hygromantea relate to modern life. Obviously, the classic is restraining a ship from sailing. But that's what you've made very, very easy in this booklet.
Right. Because that's the perfect example, is restraining a boat from sailing. Look, if you're not a fisherman, or I don't know, maybe a shipping magnate, that just doesn't seem super useful in modern life. But but you have to get an approach where you see those as metaphors. So restraining a boat from sailing, we're in a sat cap kind of time, which is all about boundaries and showing restraint.
Mm-hmm.
right? And so you can interpret the day more in the light of, having correct timing, keep, holding back until it's the right moment, showing some restraint and not just, not just struggling against the tides. And now that becomes a lot more applicable to work you might be doing.
Yeah. And I think it's also, if you're at the less nice end of things, you can always say it's about restraining someone else's ship from coming in.
Yeah.
So if you're up against someone else in an interview or for a promotion or even a competition, restrain their ship from coming in if you feel the need.
Yeah, there's plenty of lunar days that definitely can be interpreted for kind of the darker work, right? Like you can there's literally a day for destruction. What do you want? So you could destroy something in yourself that's holding you back. It's a nice way of viewing it, but you can also kick some ass, right? So clearly the days have both aspects. The lunation rite is much more focused on changing yourself for the better. So it's got a much more positive kind of light side vibe. But yeah, you can actually do a lot of the days, even for something like there's a day for fishing, which I love. You can view that day in so many ways. You can see it as a day for finding out secrets. I'm fishing for information. You can see it for a kind of a sovereignty sustainability vibe, like where you're saying, I am teaching a man to fish, right? Like give a man a fish, teach a man to fish, that kind of vibe, where you're like, I'm going to be fishing for prosperity to come to myself. And then you can also be like, I'm catfishing. I'm tricking somebody. And all of those. I
thought about that one.
And you can leverage the days in these kind of interesting ways. And when I write the Week in Magic post, I often do that based on the day of the week. So restraining a boat from sailing on a Saturday might really be about boundaries and restraints. Restraining a boat from sailing on a Tuesday might be much more pointed warfare, keeping someone's ship from coming in, right? Because it's more Mars. So you can adjust based on the timing, right?
Yeah. And I would actually say to people, if they're on the fence about subscribing to your newsletter, the Next Week in Magic is it's worth the price of admission. It's worth getting an email in your inbox just for that reminder to check the Next Week in Magic and action things based on that. It's so useful. Even, I work with Lunar Days all the time, and still every week your newsletter is the one I can't wait to open. So.
Well, I really appreciate that. And I appreciate that. And of course, and people should know that if they sign up for the newsletter, they get the Agile Manifesto for free. They get, content every week. And then in addition, now that I'm kicking off the Planning is Magic course, for the first round in the future, the course will be self-guided, right? You sign up and then you get the second lesson. And then 2 weeks later, you get the third lesson. And it's about, there's like 6 more after the first one is 6 more. It's about, a quarter's worth of 3 months, 12 weeks worth of course. And there's homework and there's all the supplementary rituals and stuff that go with. But for the first round, I'm sorry?
Is there Excel spreadsheets?
I am well known for Excel spreadsheets. There's not an Excel spreadsheet that comes with this, but there is some really interesting stuff. Like there's a project initiation rite. So to initiate and enliven your project. And it takes a little bit from the opening of the mouth, this kind of, I'm enlivening something, I'm making it an egregore and an entity in my life that I'm going to work with. There's a few short guided meditations around getting to your vision. There's tarot readings to help you with various stuff. So there's kind of all this bonus stuff. But in addition, just FYI, newsletter readers so the first round of the course is going to be a little more live. In addition to sending out a new lesson every other week, we're going to do live Q&A. So the first round of students will get on the line with me about a couple days after their lesson comes out and ask questions and get feedback live. And
which I absolutely cannot wait for.
I'm super excited. And I just want to point out that newsletter readers can get a break on the cost of the course. So the first round of the course is probably going to be a little cheaper than where it ends up. And then if you're a newsletter subscriber, you get a break. So there's stuff, because I realize the course is kind of big. It's kind of a big investment.
Yeah.
So
yeah, but it's not. I think I was listening to a consulting podcast the other day, and their course is $1,000 US. So for us in Australia right now, that's about $1,600. And it's not as many lessons as yours is. So
really,
the investment there is relative, right?
Oh, I hadn't. Yeah, pricing stuff for me like this is really hard because I've obviously put a lot of work into it, and so I want to make sure that it's, it's pretty comprehensive. I don't I haven't done all the final recording work because there's no minute like the last minute. It's actually one of my goals for the next couple of weeks while I'm off from my day job is to wrap up all the recordings. But some of the lessons are pretty significant in length. Right.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of a lot of stuff. So it needs to reflect that. But I really hate when things feel so overpriced, because in the end, and this is what I see in working with clients too, in our environment, in our world, financial concerns are almost always a part of where people are at in terms of changing their lives.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate that that's where we're at because, well, there's so much we could be doing if we lived in a different world that wasn't so focused on money all the time and on capitalism and all of that. But that's not the world we live in. And so I try to be realistic that it makes sense that people are going to be coming with questions about eliminating debt or improving their income or getting out of some terrible, terrible oppressive job and into something that is more in line with what they value and what their vision for their life is. And those are all critically important. But I don't want to ask somebody to give me $1,000, in order to help them do that, right? So it's hard for me to price stuff. The first round of the course is a 414, which is a not round number because it's numerologically interesting. I know that's a weird way of pricing anything, but there's an additional discount if you're on the newsletter. So just an FYI for folks if they want to.
Well, I can't imagine that anyone who's listened to this interview would not think that they're going to get an amazing amount out of that course. So I hope to see a few more of our listeners sign up. Ivy, this has been fantastic and just really enjoyable speaking to you and hearing your thoughts on practical magic and project management. Now, where can our listeners find you?
So I have a website, circlethrice.com. There's a link to the Planning is Magic course, which has the first free lesson, so you can kind of see what you're getting, what you're signing up for. The Lunation Rite is there, and also information about my consulting services and the blog, which has the Week in Magic posts. I also have, of course, the newsletter. Sign up at my website, and then I do keep this typical Twitter, Facebook kinds of accounts, with hints and tidbits and stuff that I post. So that's where I am in the internet world.
Well, that is fabulous. Thank you so much for joining us and being our first guest. I feel like you've set us on the right path.
I really appreciate chatting with you, and I do hope Rue feels better really soon.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much.